This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest tonight is David Ezell. David, thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you taking the time and little pre-chat before we turn the recorder on. It's just I'm anxious to see what the what magic you bring to our interview tonight. So tell us a little bit, give us a little background. Who is David Ezell?
Sure. So I'm originally from Louisiana, the northern side of Louisiana. My background is more kind of in the digital marketing, design, creative, that kind of side. I've been in Dallas for about the last 5 years now. And, I've worked kind of in the marketing, creative side of technology, nonprofits, some industries like that, but I've always wanted to be my own boss and run my own business. And I think, I've read countless books and books and books, and you always kind of find yourself not being able to relate to things where it just kind of came to that point where I was ready. I had done enough different things. I had done enough game planning, hired a business coach. We were ready. And that's kind of where we are now. I mean, we're almost a full year into it. So yeah, everything is everything is crazy every day right now.
So give me the just the 30-second kind of time frame. I mean, so take us from, say, your time at Louisiana Tech to today. What's been the quick progression? What jobs did you have in there? How did you get into what you're doing now?
Sure. So after Louisiana Tech, I moved to Atlanta for a few years, and I worked at a real estate company there. Did some digital marketing, things of that nature.
Was that your major? Was that you studied that at Tech, or?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay.
Communication design, so it's graphic design, marketing, things like that.
Great.
And the real estate company that I worked for, they specialized in new homes, apartments, things like that. But then 2008, 2009 happened. All the home industry kind of went south, and it was a blessing in disguise, because then I moved back to Louisiana for a little bit. I worked at United Way. I was their marketing director of Northeast Louisiana. So a lot of different things. It wasn't a big organization there, but it was great from the standpoint of you got to wear a lot of hats. You got to learn a lot of things, learn from people that had been there and really were doing it well. How to communicate, how to talk to people, just the way to kind of carry yourself. And that was great.
Maybe people from other nonprofits as well that were doing similar work you were doing. Yeah.
You
Go
got
ahead.
it.
I'm sorry.
No worries. And then after that, I moved to Dallas. Like I said, I've been here for 5 years, and I've worked in technology. So startup companies that are relatively larger size.
Right.
And same role, digital marketing, getting the word out digitally, things like that.
Right.
And that kind of brings us to about this time last year.
Okay. And that's kind of when you launched.
Yes, sir.
And so it's you, and I think on your website I saw you've got a kind of a web guru, and then you also have a VA that looked kind of hairy.
Yeah, our VA, her name's Kato. She's a golden doodle, mine and my wife. So she's awesome. Anytime that you're stressed, she's always on her back, ready for you to rub her belly. So it's great.
She may have been the best looking one of the three pictures I saw.
You're not right. You're not lying. So it's myself for the most part, and then I have several contractors that are really good in certain areas. So my business is all digital and creative. We're really focused on branding, how to tell your story, helping companies do that. So that's web, SEO, social media, content, all of that. So I work with a lot of contractors in multiple places. That one is really strong in social media strategy. One is really a great content writer,
right,
et cetera, et cetera. So we can kind of fuse those and bring all of those together based on the project.
So let me ask you. You kind of spurred a question as you were talking there. So if you can go back and say, look at maybe the last two quote jobs that you had.
Sure.
Was there something that happened that triggered you wanting to step out on your own, or did you just wake up one day and discover you got the entrepreneur gene and, man, it's got to be exercised somehow, or some combination?
As far back as I can remember. I mean, I remember before I even had a driver's license, riding, in Monroe, Louisiana, going into town with my mom, and we would swing by Books A Million, and I would go and get Forbes or Inc. magazine or something like that. and just
Yeah.
flip through, and then it would kind of go back to those people that it wasn't really relatable. I
Mm-hmm.
loved what they were doing and I
Sure.
loved that thought process, but this was Silicon Valley and I'm
Yep.
in Monroe. So
Yep.
it was tough, but I've always wanted to do it. Um, and then, yeah, some of these positions, like I said, they've really been beneficial in helping me to kind of build what I have. But it's just one of those things. You just kind of wake up and it's like, yeah, it's time to do it.
Time to do it.
It's not
And
going to be a better time.
yeah, and you probably, I mean, I'm guessing here. I haven't asked you this question, but it's it is a leap of faith, but you also put some things in place to kind of make kind of as insurance,
Mm-hmm.
where you maybe say, okay, I got to work on kind of the expense side of things. I got to reduce my expenses. I got to figure out
Sure.
how I can cut costs and some things like this. I'll use contractors instead of hiring employees. I mean, all these things that kind of go through your mind as you're. And did you do kind of a side gig thing before you jumped out on your own, or kind of work night and weekend type thing, or?
Yes, you're exactly right. So probably this time last year is when I officially started my business,
Mm-hmm.
but I still had my full-time day job working at a technology
Right.
company here in Dallas. And it was just that. It was nights, weekends, any kind of spare time. I spent that time finding a business coach, which anybody out there that's in this situation, find one because it's absolutely the best move ever.
I'm
That's
going to ask you
somebody
to
that,
unpack that in a minute. So go ahead and finish.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's somebody that is not afraid to get into the weeds with me. They're
Yeah.
not going to tell me yes for the sake of that.
Right.
But yeah, so getting a business coach, doing as many networking events as I could, going to as many things and planting the seeds and starting with some of those early customers, even just on some pro bono,
Sure.
projects, just so that I could get the experience and I could understand that process flow from, hi, my name is David, to we have a deal, and even further to, it's been a pleasure working with you
Yeah.
all the way through.
Yeah.
And then my wife and I kind of talked about it. And, once all certain things were established, 6 months later, here we are.
So when you started, you said you started full time like a year ago, but the transition, say maybe around the first year, you kind of worked out of the former job and you kind of went to this 24/7.
Right. Yeah. The first of this year,
Right.
2018, January is
Right.
when I left the corporate day job and went here full time.
So what's been? I mean, it's a fairly short runway, but what would you say would be the virtually the highest high that you've experienced really since January? What's that one day, that one moment, that one transaction, that one relationship that you can point to and say, wow, that this is why I'm doing this.
Oh, so in those first 6 months,
Hmm.
a lot of what I was doing was that relationship building and networking.
Right.
And after January, once I had launched full time, having some of those people that were integral to my business that I
Hmm.
could talk to about my business, that knew what I was doing, and were my brand advocates for me and were telling people about me
Yeah.
because I had worked with them before. That was when it was, they're not just saying, hey, hire David because his stuff is good. They really believed it.
Mm.
And I could really see them telling other people about it. And, I mean, to me, that's the best marketing you can ever do,
Yeah.
is having somebody else tell your story for you instead of you doing it.
Well, it's almost like that they stop price shopping
Sure.
because you're delivering so much value to them that they're like, we know he's going to be somewhat in our affordable range, but
Right.
we're not gonna comparison shop anymore because we kind of found the person that we want to do the task that we're going to ask him to do. So
Right.
that's when you somewhat arrived, I think, as a service provider.
Yeah. And it feels good. Just a little bit of validation,
Right.
because as a solopreneur, when it's, at most nights and, hours are just you inside your own head. Am I doing this right? Am I not? That can get kind of wonky if you don't kind of have some of that validation. And it's just a nice thing to be able to have somebody else that's like, no, I believe in
Sure.
this as well. You've done great stuff for me, and I'm always going to tell people
Yeah.
about you. And, it's nice.
That's certainly affirming. So, I mean, I'm going to ask you to narrow this down to maybe one or two because I mean,
Okay.
you may have a whole list of them as early stages as you are, but what would you say would be like maybe your biggest two pain points or obstacles that you've encountered since you first started?
Oh, God. So right now, every month is like that. I mean, it just is.
Kind of the
You know,
cyclical nature of revenue.
absolutely everything. And you kind of find out what months business is good and what months it's hard to get in touch with people.
Sure.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think the hardest one is just managing everything because you have to not only do sales, marketing, everything else, QuickBooks, all of it. You
Trash
also have
cans.
everything,
That's right.
making the coffee, all of it. But you also have to do the work. And, my business is called the Lanyap Group, and that means a little something extra. So that's always what we strive to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's making sure that I don't put the cart before the horse a little bit. Yes, we always want to keep the projections going up, but those people that we're working with, I mean, I want 100% focus on unbelievable work all the time.
Yep.
And then even after the case. So it's just figuring out how to manage that time the best.
Right. So what would be another one? Other than, I mean, that's a big one. That's pretty all encompassing. But
Sure.
what's one that's a little more granular, a little more specific? You say, okay, this one I just keep banging my head on the wall against this one. So
Let's see. I would probably say, I'll probably say figuring out what some of those strengths versus weaknesses are, and figuring out how you can get somebody else to leverage that,
yeah,
or whatever that case is. Like when I found my CPA to help me with that, that is not in my wheelhouse at all.
Sure.
My brain doesn't think that way. So instead of trying to, figure every single thing out, know as much as possible, but then hire somebody else that I really trust and that I know they know everything that there is to know about a certain subject, and kind of keep going. It's kind of picking those battles a little bit.
So how do you follow up that question a little bit? So how do you determine which services you're going to kind of outsource and delegate versus the ones you're going to keep? I mean, especially as early as it is and as cyclical as your revenue is right now. Sure. I mean, all of these come with a cost. So how do you kind of, I think this would be really interesting for our listeners to hear
Sure.
kind of how you process this, and you kind of understand frame the question well, or?
Sure. So we know what our sweet spot is. I mean, our business is all about branding, marketing, helping you tell your story to that in person. And if it's something that falls out of the realm of that, then I have no problem saying, let me find somebody that can do the job better. I mean, yes, we never want to say no to business, but I also know what our sweet spot is, and I know where we need to be for that.
Right.
So when it comes to something like that, I mean, I have contractors that are kind of just built in for that exact framework to stay in what we do well. If it's hosting servers and all of that kind of stuff, if somebody needs it, that's not our specialty.
Right.
We just kind of stay within our wheelhouse, and we want to be known for that one thing, as opposed to being a Walmart where they have 50 different things.
Sure.
We want to stay right there within it.
And I think, one thing you touched on right then, I don't want to put words in your mouth, and if I'm chasing this too far,
No worries.
But the idea that you said, okay, if we stay within our wheelhouse and I have contractors that I know are going to fill those specific things, then you can also kind of build that into, your cost estimate as well. If I mean, it's a replicable, model.
You got it.
Say, hey, every time I know it's going to cost me this amount of money, I know they're going to deliver in this time frame, with this quality of work, that type of thing, versus saying, well, I need somebody to do my accounting this month, and next month I'm going to have somebody clean the office, and I got to have somebody, doing, my social media. I mean, it's almost like just this hit and miss,
Right.
Approach. But I really like the way that you seem to be. I mean, you've got a fairly broad range of services within the kind of digital space, branding, SEO, that type of thing. But
Sure.
As you grow, it looks like that you're going to focus more and more, on really where is your wheelhouse, and maybe even by industry, or maybe even by,
Absolutely.
whatever
and we focused a lot of what we're doing right now just in 2 different verticals. That way we can spend all of our time talking to those 2 verticals and not trying to talk branding, marketing to construction companies, banks, automotive dealerships, because those are all 3 different messages.
Sure.
We have those 2 verticals, and they have a little bit of overlap, which makes it a little bit easier and why we chose those two. And that's kind of where we stay. In 2 years, if we notice that there's another vertical that is perfect and it lines up, great, we'll explore that. But right now we try to, that's another great thing that my business coach said in our very first meeting was getting super clear, crystal clear about your audience, about your goals, about everything. Tangible, your office, what does it look like? The people that work for you, what do they do every day? What's hanging on the walls? Because the more that you can envision it and you can see it, you know where you're going. Now you just have to reverse engineer getting there. And it makes the decision making easier. If there's another opportunity that comes along, but it deviates from your path that you're going, maybe it's not worth your time. It just makes really focus. Instead of saying, I want a successful company. Well, that's great, but define that. I want to have some employees. That's great. Define that.
So do you feel comfortable sharing those verticals?
Sure, absolutely. So we work in therapeutic healthcare and education. My wife has been in kind of the therapeutic business development world for a long time. And so when we met, that was kind of a lot of our circle, a lot of people in that industry and some education, things like that. So just in seeing them, they do such amazing work. Yeah. And they have such that powerful story to tell. But I noticed a lot of times they market the same way because marketing is kind of this bag that they bring along with them and they just plop it down and it's like, oh, we got to do something. Let's do whatever our competitors or this successful company down the road is doing, as opposed to telling their own story, which can't be replicated by anybody because it's theirs. So there's so much fun to work with, because you get to tell their story. You get to see it impacting in real life situations. And there's just so much to be done with them.
Now this is like primarily physical therapists, occupational therapists.
So a lot of those in private practice, mental health therapists. Things
music
like that.
I had a friend that was a music therapist that I didn't even know that existed.
Yes, I know. We learn all the time that there are different outsets of it, but yeah.
Yeah. So as we kind of transition here, I'm going to circle back on the business coach near the end, but I just want to kind of drill down a little deeper and get inside your head here. And so I'm really anxious to hear your answer on this one. So tell me, who is one person online that you just wake up every day and say, man, that person is my inspiration?
Oh, easy. Gary Vaynerchuk. Easy.
I'm afraid Gary V is winning the
He's
tally
winning.
sheet.
He's winning.
It's not G-rated, but the G for Gary V does not stand for G-rated, but it's certainly he is an amazing guy. Just is there anybody more focused on the planet? Maybe Michael Jordan.
Yeah, and kind of like we were talking about previously, so many times I remember as a teenager, I'd read Forbes or Inc. and all of those, Small Company and all that, or Fast Company. And all of these stories of these entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley were just so unrelatable to me. They were, I got a computer at 8 years old. I took it apart. I got an internship at Google. I went to MIT. I dropped out at 17 and I built Yahoo.
Yeah.
That's not...
Sold out at 25.
That's not anything close to what was really going on or what my level was. But that's what Gary Vaynerchuk kind of does for me, is he brings it down. And it's like, all you have to do is have vision and a focus and go. There is nothing saying you have to be at this level or this level. Just find out what that focus is, pinpoint it, and go for it.
What he picked, that's kind of this wine TV niche. That's not one that if you sat down and just kind of jotted down on paper that you would probably come up with as my life passion.
Totally.
It is such an interestingly unique, niche, and it's like, man, I can come up with a whole lot of things. Sports, I can come up with, just the digital space, but that is so interesting that he's just really made that. Just a rocket ship, based on what he's done. So.
Yeah, his father, they're immigrants, and his father had a liquor store somewhere in New York, I believe. Yeah. And Gary Vee just, he worked there on the weekends, every single day. And then he just found kind of a new way to do it, knowing
Yep.
that the internet was going to be this thing that just kind of took everybody by storm.
Yep.
And he was smart about it and never looked back, I guess.
Probably worked there illegally when he was a teenager or something for
Probably. Yeah,
years.
12-year-old.
That's right. Running the cash register in the back.
Yeah.
That's right. So tell me, do you have like a life quote that you really, you got taped up on the wall, you got it on your laptop, whatever you think? This is kind of, if I had a mantra, this would be it.
I wouldn't necessarily say that there's one. Gary Vee has tons of quotes. I have them on my cell phone and I change them out weekly, where it's all kinds of things, just kind of depending on where I am in the process of my own mental state and capacity and everything else going forward.
That's what they're good for. That's right.
Yeah. And it's so much about patience. That's been my hardest thing, is I know where I want to go, and putting everything and making it that crystal clear vision makes it a reality in my mind. But I want to be there tomorrow, and I know that that's not possible. So it's patience, But yeah, like an overarching life goal, probably not, or a quote, probably not. Like I said, they honestly change every week, because one week it's all about focus. The next week it's patience. The next week it's take a break and spend time with those around you.
Right.
Yeah, right now, it's so hard to kind of get out of the weeds.
Yep.
And to get back up to that 30,000-foot view and really survey the landscape.
Yep.
So, yeah, like I said, I change them out all the time. I find those that they grab, and I'm like, oh, that's going to be great for 2 weeks from now, and hold on to it.
I want to make you like a Yoda meme that says "Patience, young Jedi," and I'm going to send that to you for your phone. So
totally need it.
So. I love that analogy of, I'm in the weeds. I got to get back out of the weeds. But right now, buddy, you are such an early stage startup. You gotta come to work with a machete.
All the time.
You're just hacking stuff. You're
All
just
the time.
hacking it down, and because you are kind of a jack of all trades in so many ways. And even if you've outsourced some things and said no to some things, there's still so many things that 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now, you're going to have people that are going to do that for you. That that you're currently doing now. So
right.
It is it's interesting times. And when I circle back with you in 6-12 months, it's going to be fun to see the transition and what's gone on. But I want you to, instead of looking forward, I want you to look back. So
okay,
go back a couple of years, go back a year, whatever you want to go back, but just before you started your own thing. So what is one piece of advice that you would give yourself now that you think, man, this would have made my life so much easier if I would have known this from day one?
It's so cliche, I feel like, in this business, but it's start earlier.
Wow.
I kind of feel like it was the exact right time for me. Because I had worked at different places in different industries, all kind of in that digital marketing space. And those kind of prepared me and gave me the wherewithal to understand client relationships and how to handle projects and everything else needed. But that fear can be crippling when it's like, I'm going to leave something that's stable and jump out of my own. But it's really not. Game planning it ahead of time.
Sure.
Having that business coach, build in some of those metrics of, I want to hit this month, or I want to hit this much monetarily in December. And if that happens, we're doing it. And you don't wake up that first day and say, oh crap, it's 9 a.m. What do I do? You just do this. You just do the same stuff you were doing last night at midnight. It's not any different. You planted the seeds. You know where you're going. You don't just wake up and hope that it works, because that's never going to work. So, if I could tell myself something else, it would have probably been just start earlier. Just jump,
So I'm gonna take a little segue here. I've got this little mantra that my degree at university was in economics. So
awesome.
I really love that, just the whole idea, the theory behind money and markets, how markets work. And so I've got this little thing about, say capitalism versus socialism. So I'm looking at both of them, and so I think sometimes our society is a mix of those two things, but in a perfectly free market capitalistic system, the two things that an entrepreneur has to have exist. And in my mind, the two things that they've got to have is they've got to have the fear of failure and they've got to have the reward of their success.
Right.
And so when you were talking about, when I get up at 9 o'clock in the morning, I just do it. I mean, because you really are driven by those two factors. The factor of, if I don't do it, I'm going to fail. I'm going to starve to death. Nobody's going to pay my bills.
Right.
But if I do succeed, there will be a reward for that. And it's not just I'll feel better about myself because I did it on my own type thing, but it really is, kind of a recompense for working hard. And
Sure.
when you're working for a company, there's always limits on that. There's such a small band that you can affect virtually either way. I mean, we've all worked for companies, you've had
Sure.
poor performers and high performers, and the difference in their compensation is minimal,
Right.
So you'd remove that incentive. So I love the fact that you when you touched on that about, you just get up and you just do. I mean, you really just do it.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, that's exactly what it is. There are some months, I remember a Wednesday, like 3 months ago, where there were 3 different projects that I had been this close to closing. We had planted the seeds, watered. I mean, it was weeks of correspond. I mean, they were right there. And then one, their board doesn't meet that month. So let's connect next month. One, hey, I think we're going to go a different direction. Connect later. One, hey, we're going to take the summer off. All of our employees are out of town. Let's follow up in September. And it's just like that one day, and you feel that because it does feel like that failure because you're a one-man army.
Yep.
And you can only do so much. And
Yep.
these 3 plants that you've been watering daily, they're not going to work, but you just can't let that linger. You have
Yep.
to wake up that next day and say, nope, and keep going.
Next.
And that's
Yep.
hard.
Yep.
That's hard because I think just in human nature, you want to just kind of sit there and feel bad for yourself and this didn't work, but you don't have time for that.
Sure.
But
because you're on your own, you have that driver behind you. I mean,
Absolutely.
if you're an employee, where the company survives is probably not resting solely on your shoulders.
Right.
You're probably one small piece of, and I'm not giving workers
You're right.
a disincentive around the world. So
You're
don't
right.
hear that, listeners. But it's just a different environment. It's just a different
is.
world. So
It
let's touch real quick before we wrap up just on the business coach. How did you determine that you needed to use a business coach? How did you determine how to find one? Because I mean that question comes up, often in people
Sure.
that I encounter in our podcasts and other spheres. But how did you make that decision?
So whenever I was just getting started, I mean, right out of the gate, I had like 1 or 2 pro bono clients just to sink my teeth into something. She's actually used to be the founder of the company my wife used to work for.
Mm-hmm.
And, she had been in kind of a founder role capacity for a long time, but now business coaching, and she's an entrepreneur from the word go.
Sure.
She's always into things. She has a motor on her, crazy, just all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But she's unbelievable. And when my wife suggested that I talk with her, our first meeting, it was like, yeah, this is going to be great. And when we started, because it was still in its infancy, we met every single Tuesday morning. And she would say, what do you have to get done by Friday? Because I would always kind of have that tendency to look further into the future of, let's make a YouTube channel. Let's do all this and all this. And she's like, that's great. And we'll need that at some point. But what do we have to do to close the sale by Friday? Let's get to it. How much money are you making? What are you charging? We worked through everything. And she wasn't afraid to tell me, hey, that's not going to work. You won't be able to survive doing that.
Right.
And then once I jumped and things started to get a little bit more, I don't want to say autopilot, but they started to get a little bit more kind of methodical and one after another. We backed off to once every other week. And that's where we are now. And you should see, like in our house, we have this big sliding glass door. After every single meeting with her, I have a dry erase marker and that window is just covered in stuff, because I'm one of those that I can't sit still.
Yeah.
I'm having to bolt myself down right here. I just can't sit still. So on the phone with her, walking around, writing things on the window, but but yeah, I mean, find somebody else who is not going to be afraid to tell you no,
Hmm.
but also will get into the weeds with you,
Right.
and somebody that you can contact and say, "Hey, I am stuck. I don't know what to do,"
Yep.
and that they'll be there for you
Yep.
because we're all doing it together, figuring out as we go. I mean, I'm definitely not the best business person there is, but you always learn. You read things, you watch other people that are where you want to be, and you try to model what you're doing
Right.
after them, and you learn some of their failures, mistakes, successes, and we're all kind of doing it together.
Did you ever reach over there and just kind of pull on her hair, make sure she's not Gary Vee in a wig or something?
I know,
I mean, there sound like there's some similarities there.
I know. There really are. I know.
That's
And
funny.
she knows that Gary Vee is my guy,
Yeah.
but she's like, even Gary Vee wasn't Gary Vee in six
Oh, that's
months.
true.
She was like, he was at Wine TV for years and years, and
Yep.
then I had never heard of him until what 2 years ago when he
Hmm.
really kind of hit
Right.
that tipping point. So it's good. You just have to keep doing the same motions, repeated, 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 doing awesome work, going above and beyond for your clients all the time, putting them first, and everything else will take care of itself. And it's just not getting that cart too far before the horse. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't look at it as a company with 30 employees because I'm not ready for that yet. There would be things
Yeah.
that I would be terrible at. So you have to enjoy the process as you go. And again, we go back to I need patience. So that's
I
what I
I mean, I
try.
I love the way she kind of wrapped that up, and I mean, it was funny a minute ago. You were talking about, man, I have to like strap myself down in the chair. So when I
Yeah.
did the very first interview for Rising Tide, so I have a little standing desk here, and I didn't have a stool or a chair that I sat on. So I'm sitting here doing the interview, and I'm doing my best Stevie Wonder imitation, the whole time. And I got it and watched the video back, and I thought, man, I just made myself car sick just watching this Rocky. So I have to get something to kind of hold me in place
Bolt you
here. So
in.
that's right, that's right.
Got it.
Well, David,
Yeah.
let's man, I hate to wrap it up, but I just want to kind of close it and just give you a chance
Awesome.
to if there's anything that I haven't asked, touched on, ask you about that you want to just kind of wrap it up with, and then also tell people where they can find you.
Sure. No, I want to thank you again for the opportunity. It's been great. I mean, I think it's just that whole constant thing with entrepreneurship. I remember when I first jumped and I would tell people that, yeah, this is my first week out. People are like, "Oh man, are you nervous?" And you're going to get that kind of stuff
Yeah.
and you're going to have that inside, but just make as much of a plan beforehand
Hmm.
as possible. Get those ducks in a row beforehand because then whenever you get ready to go, it makes it that much easier. And you're not trying to find out all of those answers on day one when day one
Yeah.
should be spent focused on your business. You've kind of done some of that upfront legwork. Um, but yeah, our website is thelanyapgroup.com.
That'll be on the
And
show notes. Yeah.
awesome. And as we said, lanyap is a funny word. It's a South Louisiana Cajun word, has G's and P's and all kinds of other crazy letters that don't need to be there. But we've kind of taken the phonetic spelling. So it's Lanyap, but it means a little something extra. It's like if you go to the bakery and get a dozen donuts and you come home to find 13, that's lanyap.
Yep.
It's a little something extra. So that's what we always focus on, is to deliver more than what you thought you were going to get and to be that sounding board and that catalyst for everybody that we work with.
Well, folks, just I encourage you to go to the website and click on the About page and just read a little more about the history, about the story behind the Lanyap Group. And like I said, you'll see that good-looking picture of the virtual assistant Golden Doodle down there at the bottom right. and
Show Cato some love.
that's
That's
right.
it.
Show the dog some love, and just as we wrap up, just to steal a line from his business coach that David mentioned earlier, just to ask yourself the question, listeners. So, what do you have to get done by Friday? What a great question! What a great question to wrap up our episode. And listeners, it's your turn to take these lessons and put them in play put them in practice in your own endeavors, but also to offer feedback to this show about the pain points that he mentioned, because we want to join together and cause all boats to rise in a rising tide. David, thanks a
That's
lot.
it.
Appreciate your
Of
help.
course. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it.